Hi, Jasmine. Thank you so much for joining Coop TV to talk to us about this very important topic. So, we know that UH is one of the top five most diverse campuses in the US, and we hold over 3,000 international students. What did you feel when you heard that students who did not meet the requirements had to go back home, that they had to essentially leave the US?
I mean, when I first heard the news, I was honestly in disbelief. I didn't think that it was even real. I went and I did the research myself that night, and I saw the ICE regulations that had come out, and I immediately was very worried, just because I know that we have such a large international student population at the University of Houston, and international students are so valuable to like just our campus community, research, diversity, everything. My dad was an international student at U of H, and I know that there's so many others. There's so many people in my own SGA administration that ran with me that are international students. The Students Unite platform had to do with having inclusive student support, and part of that, in the first like 6 weeks of my presidency, we started UH's first international student mentorship program. So like as a result of all of that, I was really outraged by the news. I was really worried. I had no idea what was going to happen, mostly because we had heard that which was going to go completely online after Thanksgiving. And so that really was the primary concern, because I figured, I know that we're going to do hybrid classes. So because of that, it should be like international students should be okay if we just tweak things and make sure that everybody is taking the right type of class. But I was mostly concerned that in the middle of the semester, they would have to be worried about having to go all the way back home. And that's obviously really disruptive, not just like socially, but academically. I don't know how any student is expected to do well and concentrate and focus on their classes and have this looming fear that they're going to have to leave or get deported in the middle of their semester.
Right. And then everything that they have here, basically any job opportunities, things like that, those would also be affected. I'm sure that your team felt that you needed to do something. What was your team able to do to help those students or help voice the concerns that some students had at the University of Houston?
The very first thing that I did was that the morning after I found out, I emailed Dr. Short. She's Provost Short. She's our provost. So she deals with all of the different types of classes and a lot to do with like the reopening. And so we've seen that there's like 3 different types of classes that people are going to see during the fall. And so I reached out to her immediately, since I read the regulations, and the regulations stated that if the campus was completely online, then they would deport the international students. But if they had like hybrid courses, the university would have to kind of certify that they are one of those like hybrid universities, and the course load the international students were taking was not completely online. And so I immediately reached out to her and I said, has U of H certified that they are one of like these hybrid schools? And what's going to happen in the fall after Thanksgiving when we had plans to go completely online? What are we going to do about that? And so when she emailed me back, she told me that the biggest priority for them was to make sure that every international student was able to take a high flex, like hybrid class. And it was part of their degree plan, and it was something that would be available, because I believe it was only like one required like in-person class in order for them to stay. So they just had to the provost was just making sure that every single one of those like 3,000 international students that we have at U of H was for sure going to be taking a high flex class so they could stay. So that was the first thing I did. I also emailed Director Jin Zhang. She's the director of the International Student and Scholar Services Office. I've been working with her pretty closely, in her office pretty closely, to kind of implement that international student mentorship program that I mentioned. And I reached out to her as well, and I said, what's being done? And she pretty much assured me that the university was really working hard on it, and that there was really nothing else that could be done on like a university level other than make sure that everybody had a certain amount of like high flex class available to them. But then, because there was nothing else that we could really do on a university level, this is a federal issue, and part of being, student body president or being in SGA at all is not just doing advocacy at your own university, but also advocating for things that affect students like on a national or even state level. So what I did is I wrote this letter to President Trump and the Trump administration, and I can read like the last part. There was a lot of like prefacing of, this is why international students are so important, trying to phrase it in a way that I guess the government and the Trump administration would understand. But at the end, we said, we strongly urge U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, to extend the flexibility granted to international students in the spring and summer 2020 semesters, and to revise its policy to allow for all international students with a valid F1 or M1 visa to continue their coursework in the United States, whether their education is fully online, in person, or hybrid. So we sent that letter out, and we were able to get 11 SGAs from across Texas public universities to also sign on the letter as well. So we had all of that signed, and we sent that letter out to the Trump administration. Whether or not, that letter was part of why they decided to revoke those, I don't know. We like to think so, but it probably had a little bit more to do with Harvard and MIT suing them.
We're really glad that on Tuesday, students were able, or ICE had, stepped back from what they were doing and saying that they were going to deport students who did not meet the qualifications. And we're so thankful that that happened. We're also thankful that you stepped up for the students who essentially couldn't have a voice, that or they do have a voice, but, they didn't know what to do. And so very thankful that you were able to move along with the different departments that we have at UH to help our international students. So we really appreciate that. Were there anything that you heard from students while this was going on? Was there something that impacted you, shocked you, anything from the students?
I think I was mostly shocked by just like the sheer number of international students that I knew that were, around me, that were my classmates and my peers. A lot of times, like, we talk about like certain groups of students, and we're kind of removed from that situation if that doesn't apply to us. And I realized really quickly how many of my own friends and people in my circle were international students, and it was surprising, and it definitely made me want to fight even harder, really, because I saw that this isn't just like, oh, it's just a couple of students. It was so many students. So I had to make sure that we did as much as we could, as much as was in our power. And I wanted to do as much as possible to make sure that they wouldn't get deported in the middle of the semester. And just having to think about something as crazy as you might not be able to stay in the country where you're studying, I just think it was really shocking. It's something that, people who aren't international students, like, we take that for granted. We don't ever have to think about, oh, one day, my visa is going to get revoked and then I'm going to have to leave in the middle of my semester. What's going to happen to my studies? Like, all of the tuition dollars, like, what's going to happen to that? Like, there's just a lot of different factors that are involved, and just seeing the sheer number of students that were going to be affected, and just how it would affect their academics and their social life, and just, it's one of those issues that even if we're not a part of it, we can all kind of relate to that struggle of like, not just that fear that we're not going to do well at school, and this is just like an added component to that. So it was just really surprising to see how many students were truly affected. I had a lot of people kind of private message me, DM me on social media, very concerned, asking about, what was going to happen. And that just made me want to work even harder to make sure that, they would be okay, that they wouldn't have to get deported in the middle of the semester.
Yeah. I'm glad that, again, that we were able to move and do things for our students and make sure that they felt that they weren't alone in this moment. So thank you so much for this time, for your time and speaking with us at Coop TV, and hope to hear more from you.